Welcome back for another deep dive. Ready to tackle something pretty mind-blowing today.
I'm all ears.
Okay, so we're going to be looking at the U.S., but like really looking at it by focusing on the top 10 biggest states by area.
Oh, wow. By area. Okay.
Yeah. Our source is this article called 10 Largest States in the United States. And get this, I think we're going to discover some stuff that'll totally change how you see the U.S. map.
I always love when that happens. Like you think you know something and then bam.
Exactly. So first up, we got to talk about the total champ when it comes to size.
Well, let me guess. Texas.
Good guess, but no, it's Alaska.
Alaska.
Well, yeah, it's absolutely massive, like seriously huge. 1,723,337 square kilometers. Or, if you prefer miles, it's 665,384 of those.
Hold on, let me process that number. Wait, that's bigger than Texas, California, and Montana put together, right?
You got it. Alaska is the undisputed heavyweight champion of U.S. states.
Wow. That kind of throws a wrench in your average mental picture of the U.S., doesn't it? Alaska just dominating everything up there.
Totally. And you know what that means. Building stuff there, roads, bridges, anything. It's a whole different level of challenge compared to the rest of the states. I mean, think about the terrain, the weather, the distances involved.
Absolutely. Alaska's size definitely poses some unique obstacles when it comes to infrastructure and development.
It makes you wonder, like, how do people even get around in a place that vast?
Right. It'd be fascinating to dive into the everyday realities of living in a state where just getting from point A to point B can be an epic adventure in itself.
Totally agree. All right, so Alaska's taking the gold, but let's move on to the runner-up. And yeah, it's Texas, coming in at a respectable 695,662 square kilometers, which is 268,596 square miles. Still pretty huge, but like we said, Alaska's in a whole other league.
Less than half the size of Alaska. But hey, it's Texas. They probably still consider themselves pretty massive.
Oh, definitely. Everything's bigger in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Even their state pride. But speaking of states with outsized personalities, we can't forget California. At number 3, it clocks in at 423,967 square kilometers, or 163,694 square miles.
California, the Golden State, it's not just large, it's practically an empire unto itself, culturally and economically.
So true. And let's not forget its crazy diverse geography, mountains, deserts, beaches, you name it.
It's a microcosm of the United States in so many ways, with its varied landscapes, industries, and populations.
All right, moving on. Up next, we've got Montana. It's called the Treasure State, and it boasts 380,831 square kilometers, or 147,039 square miles.
Beautiful state, breathtaking landscapes.
And hot on its heels is New Mexico, the land of enchantment, with 314,917 square kilometers, or 121,590 square miles. So both these states are known for their massive landscapes, and they're pretty close in size, too.
You know, it makes you think, how much does living surrounded by that much open space affect a state's culture? Like in Montana, do you think all that wide open land fosters a certain spirit of self-reliance and independence?
I could definitely see that. It's like the landscape itself pushes you to be more resourceful and self-sufficient. Not to mention there's probably a deeper connection to nature when you're constantly surrounded by it.
Yeah, it's not just about the physical space, it's about the mindset that comes with living in a place where you're not constantly bumping into other people and structures. It changes your perspective.
Totally. All right, let's shift gears to Arizona, number 6 on our list.
Ah, Arizona. Sun, heat, and the Grand Canyon.
Exactly. It covers 295,234 square kilometers, or 113,990 square miles. And of course, it's home to one of the most epic natural wonders in the world.
You know, thinking about the Grand Canyon isn't just about admiring its beauty, it's about grasping its sheer scale. It's like a window into deep time, millions of years of geological processes shaping the Earth.
I've never been, but I've seen pictures. It looks absolutely massive.
It is, and standing there on the rim, you can't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder at the forces that shape that landscape, and also a bit of our own insignificance in the grand scheme of things.
I can imagine. Okay, moving on to number 7, we have Nevada, coming in at 286,380 square kilometers, or 110,571 square miles.
Ah, Nevada, home to both glittering casinos and endless desert.
Exactly. It's like this weird mix of extravagance and isolation. Most people think of Vegas, but then there's all that open desert surrounding it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating juxtaposition. You have this vibrant, man-made spectacle of lights and entertainment, and then you step outside the city limits, and it's like stepping into another world, silence, emptiness, vastness.
Maybe that's part of what makes Vegas so appealing. It's like this concentrated burst of energy in the middle of nowhere.
Could be. I wonder, would Vegas have the same allure if it wasn't surrounded by all that empty space?
Interesting questions. Like maybe the contrast makes it even more enticing.
Maybe. It's definitely something to ponder.
Totally. All right, now we're getting to the states that are really neck and neck in terms of size. At number 8, we've got Colorado with 269,601 square kilometers, or 104,093 square miles.
The Rocky Mountains.
You got it. Then super close behind at number 9, it's Oregon. It covers 254,799 square kilometers, or 98,378 square miles. And rounding out our top 10, at number 10, we have Wyoming with 253,335 square kilometers, or 97,813 square miles.
Wow, so Colorado, Oregon, and Wyoming. Such different states, but all incredibly vast and geographically diverse.
I know, right? It's like they all bring something completely unique to the table. Colorado with its majestic mountains, Oregon with its rugged Pacific coastline, and Wyoming with its sprawling plains and iconic national parks.
And yet they're all practically the same size. It really highlights the incredible range of landscapes that we find within the United States.
You know what's even crazier? Oregon and Wyoming are practically twins when it comes to area, even though they're on opposite sides of the country and have totally different vibes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's wild, right?
It is pretty mind-blowing. You'd never guess just by looking at a map or thinking about their reputations that they'd be so similar in size. It makes you wonder, what really defines a state's identity? Is it size, geography, history, culture?
It's really a mix of all those things, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a complex interplay of factors.
Right.
But the fact that two states can be almost identical in size, yet so different in every other way, really challenges our assumptions about how size defines a place.
It shows that there's so much more to a state than just its physical dimension.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we need to look beyond the surface and delve deeper to truly understand the unique character of these massive states. It's like size is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Totally. And speaking of puzzles, it's kind of crazy to think how much influence these massive states have, not just on the U.S., but on the whole world.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Think about it. Governing a state like Texas, it's not just about representing people, it's about managing resources across these crazy distances.
It's like they're their own little countries, practically.
Right. And then you've got economic powerhouses like California, Texas again. Their sheer size makes them major players, even globally.
It's mind-boggling. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the cool stuff, the landscapes, the vibes, all that. What pops into your head when you think Texas?
Texas. Well, it's hard to ignore that whole Lone Star thing, you know? That fierce independence. It's more than just a saying. It's a way of life down there.
I've always found that super interesting. Like, does being from such a huge state make you more proud, more, I don't know, self-sufficient?
I think so, yeah. Living in a place where you can drive for hours and still be in the same state, it got to change your perspective. You rely on yourself more. You're not always looking outward for help.
Makes sense. And speaking of self-reliance, what about California? It's known for its abundance, but it's also got some major challenges, right? Like water.
Oh, absolutely. California's size and its climate make water a constant balancing act. They've got big cities, tons of farms, and then all these delicate ecosystems all needing water.
Giant puzzle.
Exactly. And climate change is making that puzzle even harder to solve.
Let's head north a bit. Montana, New Mexico. 2 states with tons of natural beauty, rich history. What stands out to you?
Montana, for me, it's all about that wide open space. It's like you can still feel the spirit of the Wild West out there. Native Americans, cowboys, miners, it's all layered into the landscape.
It's almost like you can sense history just standing on the prairie.
And New Mexico, it's got a similar historical vibe, but it's also layered with all these different cultures. Ancient ruins, Spanish missions, modern art. It's a blend you don't find everywhere.
A real melting pot.
Yeah. And the landscape plays a role too. Deserts, mountains, plains, each area breeds its own little cultural pocket.
Fascinating. Back to Arizona for a sec. We talked Grand Canyon, but what else about its size impacts how the state feels?
Arizona. Man, it's a state of extremes. Scorching desert, then boom, you've got snow-capped peaks in the San Francisco peaks.
Rexy.
Crazy.
Talk about variety.
And that attracts different folks. Retirees looking for sun, young people in the tech scene. Everyone finds their spot.
Speaking in contrast, what about Nevada? Vegas, but also all that desert. How do those two worlds even exist side by side?
It's wild, right? I think the desert makes Vegas even more intense. Like you're in this sensory overload after being surrounded by emptiness.
Great point. It's like the quiet makes the loud even louder.
Exactly. It makes you think, would Vegas be the same if it wasn't in the middle of nowhere?
Mind blown. Okay, last group. Colorado, Oregon, Wyoming. practically the same size, but totally different vibes. What makes them so unique?
Colorado, it's got to be the Rocky Mountains, right? They dominate everything: economy, recreation, even the sense of community.
Yeah, I bet living with those mountains looming over you is a powerful experience.
Then you've got Oregon, coastline, forests, that Pacific Northwest vibe. They're known for being progressive, and you can see that in how they treat the environment.
Like the landscape influences their values.
Yeah.
Cool.
And Wyoming.
Yeah.
Wide open plains, national parks, cowboy country. It's all about that rugged individual spirit respecting the land and its history.
It's amazing how 3 states roughly the same size can be so different.
Right. It just goes to show that size isn't everything. Geography, history, culture, it all comes together to create a state's unique identity.
It's kind of mind-blowing, right? All these huge states, each one's so different.
Yeah, it really shows you how massive and how diverse the U.S. is.
And it makes you think, what's next for these places? Especially with all the stuff happening in the world. Climate change, more people, new technology. How are they going to handle it all?
Well, climate change is definitely going to be a big one for all of them. But how they'll be affected, that depends on where they are and what resources they've got.
Yeah, true.
Like, take California and Arizona. They're already struggling with water, right? They'll need to get creative to manage what they've got. And then you've got states with those long coastlines, like California again, Oregon, Alaska, rising sea levels. That's going to be a huge issue for them.
So each state kind of has to figure out its own way to deal with things.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you've got more people moving to these states all the time. Texas, Colorado, their populations are booming. That puts a strain on everything: roads, schools, housing. They'll have to find ways to grow without losing what makes them special.
It's a tough balancing act.
For sure. And then there's technology, right? That's a wild card. It can help solve some problems, but also create new ones. Well, think about it. We could use tech to find new energy sources, make transportation better, connect people in rural areas. But then you've got things like automation taking away jobs, and all that misinformation spreading online. That doesn't help.
So it's not just about using the latest tech. It's about using it wisely.
Exactly. We need to make sure it benefits everyone, not just a select few.
That makes sense. It's like we were saying earlier, looking at these states, it can't just be about size. We got to think about all the pieces of the puzzle, the people, the environment, how everything fits together.
Exactly. It's about understanding these states as complex systems, each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Well, it's been awesome exploring all this with you. We've learned about how big these states are, what they look like, what makes them tick.
And hopefully we've inspired our listeners to learn even more.
So as we wrap up, here's a final thought for everyone. If you could visit any of these 10 states, which one would it be and why? What about its size, its landscape, its history, its culture calls out to you?
There's so much to discover in these amazing states. Keep exploring, and happy travels.